Sophia Rossi navigated the crowded streets of Los Angeles with the practiced ease of someone used to getting where she needed to be. Her Lamborghini Urus, sleek and commanding in its metallic blue finish, glided through traffic, its engine purring like a contented predator. She didn't notice the curious glances from passers-by. She was used to being noticed. Her hazel eyes focused ahead, framed by perfectly styled black hair that cascaded over her shoulders. To the world, she was the embodiment of success, a real estate magnate, the architect of her own empire. But to those who truly knew her, Sophia was a woman who carried her wealth and power with quiet grace, her heart guarded by the walls she had built over years of ambition and sacrifice. Tonight, however, was meant to be about friends, not business. She pulled up outside Mary's apartment, parking the Urus with precision. The familiar scent of lavender greeted her as she entered the cozy living room, where laughter and the soft hum of conversation welcomed her like an old friend. The warmth of Mary's apartment was a haven, a place where Sophia could set aside the weight of her responsibilities, even if just for a little while. But the evening's comfort was interrupted when Mary suddenly clutched her chest, her face pale and beads of sweat forming on her brow. "Sophia, I don't feel—" Mary's words faltered, her voice trailing off as her body leaned into the armrest for support. Sophia was instantly by her side, her hand gently gripping Mary's arm. "Mary, what's wrong? Talk to me." Before Mary could respond, a knock at the door broke the tension. Sophia hesitated, her pulse quickening as she glanced toward the entryway. She opened the door to reveal a man in his early 30s, wearing a navy blue coat that had clearly seen better days. He was tall, with a lean build and a briefcase in hand. His brown hair was tousled, his eyes a piercing shade of blue that seemed to carry their own quiet storm. "I have a delivery for Mary," he said, his voice steady, though his gaze shifted to the scene inside. Without waiting for an explanation, Sophia stepped aside. "Please, we need help. My friend isn't well," she said, her voice calm but urgent. The man, John, she learned later, didn't hesitate. He stepped inside, setting the briefcase aside as he moved toward Mary. His movements were efficient, deliberate. "We need to get her to the hospital," he said, his tone matter-of-fact but reassuring. Bending down, he scooped Mary into his arms with surprising ease, his coat brushing against the furniture as he carried her to the door. Sophia followed, her breath hitching as she saw the strain of worry etched across Mary's face. She climbed into the back seat of John's car, a practical yet well-kept sedan. Mary rested in Sophia's lap as John drove, his hands gripping the wheel with steady determination. The city blurred past them, a rush of neon lights and shadows. For the first time in years, Sophia felt powerless, her perfectly ordered world momentarily slipping out of her grasp. They arrived at the hospital in record time. John parked in the emergency bay, and moments later, Mary was whisked away by a team of doctors. Left alone in the waiting room, Sophia and John sat side by side, the sterile hum of fluorescent lights filling the silence between them. "Thank you," Sophia said finally, turning to face him. "I don't know what I would have done without you." He gave a slight nod, his expression softening. "I'm just glad I could help." There was something about him, an unassuming kindness that contrasted sharply with her world of high-stakes deals and meticulously planned appearances. They began to talk, the conversation flowing as naturally as a river finding its course. He told her about his life as a courier, the odd hours, the long drives. She shared glimpses of her own world, her voice tinged with a vulnerability she rarely allowed herself. By the time Mary's doctor emerged to assure them she was stable and resting comfortably, Sophia found herself reluctant to leave John's company. As they stepped outside into the cool night air, she glanced up at him, her heels clicking softly against the pavement. "Would you have dinner with me tomorrow?" she asked, her voice tentative but bold. John hesitated, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. "Dinner?" he repeated, as though the concept were foreign. "Yes," she said, smiling. "I'd like to thank you properly." Though he felt a pang of uncertainty, thinking of his modest life and what he could possibly offer someone like her, John found himself nodding. "Sure, dinner. As Sophia walked away, her silhouette illuminated by the glow of the hospital lights, John stood there for a moment longer, the weight of the day settling over him. He had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long while, he felt the faint stirrings of hope. After leaving the hospital, John drove through the quiet streets, the faint hum of his car a contrast to the whirlwind of thoughts racing through his mind. The city lights blurred past him, each glowing orb a reminder of how far removed his life felt from the world Sophia inhabited. He couldn't shake the feeling that their worlds were not just different but diametrically opposed. As the car pulled into the narrow lot of the Courier Dispatch office, John tightened his grip on the steering wheel, steeling himself for the conversation ahead. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed softly, casting an unforgiving glow over the cluttered space. The office smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink. John approached his boss's desk, a battered wooden piece piled with papers and receipts. Mr. Lawrence, a gruff man in his late 50s, looked up, his thick-rimmed glasses slipping down his nose. "John," he grunted, "what are you doing here? Your shift's over." "I need more work," John said, his voice steady despite the knot tightening in his stomach. "Extra routes, night shifts, anything." Mr. Lawrence frowned, leaning back in his chair. "Look, kid, I'd love to help, but we're not exactly rolling in opportunities right now. The holiday season's over, and business is slow. Everyone's cutting back." John's heart sank, but he pushed forward. "Please, anything would help. I've got bills piling up and—" He hesitated, unwilling to lay bare the full extent of his struggles. Mr. Lawrence sighed, rubbing his temples. "I get it, John. Times are tough for everyone. But I can't give you work I don't have. You're a good worker, but this is all I can offer." Defeated, John nodded and turned toward the door. The chill of the night greeted him as he stepped outside, the weight of disappointment settling heavily on his shoulders. Meanwhile, in her luxurious hotel suite high above the bustling city, Sophia lay sprawled across a king-sized bed draped in crisp white linens. The room was a symphony of understated opulence, from the glimmering chandelier casting soft light across the space to the floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of Los Angeles. A delicate flute of champagne rested on the side table, untouched, its golden bubbles rising lazily. She stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. The events of the day replayed vividly. John's quiet strength, his unassuming kindness, the way he had handled Mary with such care. For a woman who had spent years surrounded by polished exteriors and calculated charm, John was refreshingly real. Sophia hugged a pillow close, a soft smile playing on her lips. She thought about the dinner she had suggested, the image of him agreeing lingering in her mind like a favorite melody. For the first time in a long while, anticipation bubbled within her, a sense of excitement she hadn't felt in years. Back in his modest one-bedroom apartment, John trudged through the door, flicking on the overhead light to reveal a space that was clean but undeniably worn. The furniture was mismatched, and the walls bore the faint scars of age, but it was home. A stack of unopened envelopes sat on the kitchen counter, their ominous presence a constant reminder of his financial struggles. He kicked off his shoes and sank onto the faded couch, his head falling into his hands. The weight of unpaid bills, rent, utilities, and the ever-growing expense of supporting his 6-year-old daughter pressed heavily on his mind. She lived with her mother now, a quiet arrangement that was better for her stability but left him aching with guilt. He did what he could, sending what little money he had after meeting his own needs, but it never felt like enough. Lying down, he stared at the ceiling, the events of the day playing in his mind like a reel. He thought about Sophia's world, a world of wealth, elegance, and ease, and compared it to his own. He wanted to impress her, to rise to the occasion. But how? The next day arrived with the golden warmth of the California sun. John stood outside the most luxurious restaurant in Los Angeles, shifting nervously in his well-worn blazer. The reflection of his figure in the mirrored glass of the entrance only amplified his insecurities. He tugged at his tie, wishing it didn't feel so tight. And then she appeared. Sophia stepped out of a sleek black car, her crimson dress catching the sunlight as it hugged her figure perfectly. Her heels clicked confidently against the pavement as she approached, her smile radiant. "Hi, John," she said, her voice light and warm. For a moment, all his worries evaporated. She was stunning, breathtaking, even, and he couldn't help but smile back. "You look amazing," he managed, his voice betraying the awe he felt. "Thank you," she replied, her eyes sparkling. "Shall we?" Inside, the restaurant was a haven of luxury, its soft lighting and polished decor exuding sophistication. Once seated, the waiter handed them menus bound in leather, each dish described in a language that felt foreign to John. As he scanned the prices, his pulse quickened. "Order whatever you like," Sophia said, her tone casual but sincere. "I'll cover everything." Her words left him momentarily speechless. The knot in his chest loosened slightly, replaced by a strange blend of relief and gratitude. After the dinner plates had been cleared and the restaurant began to quiet, Sophia leaned toward John, her smile soft yet full of suggestion. "The night doesn't have to end here," she said, her voice like velvet. "Why don't we go back to my place? It's quieter, and we can keep talking." John hesitated, his hand still resting on the edge of his empty glass. "I don't know," he said, his voice trailing off as he glanced away. A hint of self-doubt flickered in his expression, but Sophia leaned closer, her eyes locking with his. "Come on," she urged gently. "No pressure. Just good company and a little more time together." Her smile widened, and the warmth of her gaze melted his resolve. Finally, he nodded. "Okay," he said, the word coming out softer than he intended. The drive to Sophia's house felt like a world apart from the polished formality of the restaurant. In the confines of the car, they were less guarded, their laughter filling the space as they traded stories. Sophia played music from her curated playlist, romantic ballads mixed with light-hearted classics, and hummed along, occasionally glancing at John to see his reaction. At one point, a particularly upbeat tune came on, and Sophia couldn't resist singing the chorus. "You know this one, don't you?" she teased, nudging his arm. John chuckled, shaking his head. "Maybe, but you sing it better than I ever could." "Oh, stop," she said, laughing. But the sound of her joy was contagious, and soon they were both laughing so hard that tears pricked the corners of their eyes. Sophia's home was a modern marvel of sleek architecture and warm elegance, perched high in the hills with a view that stretched out over the city's glittering lights. As they stepped inside, the scent of fresh lilies greeted them, mingling with the faint aroma of polished wood. "I hope you like wine," Sophia said, already heading toward a glass cabinet that housed an impressive collection of bottles. "I'm not exactly an expert," John admitted, but his words were light-hearted. Sophia pulled out a bottle with a practiced grace and handed it to her housekeeper, who appeared with a tray of fine cheeses and artisanal crackers arranged like art. John glanced at the tray, his unease creeping in as he realized he couldn't name a single item. "Do you like cheese?" Sophia asked, her tone casual. "Sure," John replied, though his smile betrayed a hint of nervousness. He reached for a piece of what looked like cheddar but turned out to have a strong, tangy flavor that was entirely unfamiliar. Sophia noticed his hesitation and leaned closer. "Try this one," she said, offering him a small piece of brie on a cracker. Her enthusiasm was disarming, and though he felt out of his depth, John couldn't help but be touched by her effort to make him comfortable. The wine flowed easily, loosening the tension in the room. John, though initially reserved, found himself laughing again as Sophia recounted a particularly absurd story from one of her real estate dealings. "I can't believe you said that to a client," he said, shaking his head with a grin. "Oh, you have no idea the things I've had to say to close a deal," she replied, her laughter sparkling like the wine in their glasses. As the first bottle emptied, Sophia clinked her glass lightly against his. "Another?" she asked, her cheeks slightly flushed. John hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding. "Why not? Let me open it this time." He took the bottle and began working the corkscrew with a focus that made Sophia smile. She disappeared briefly, returning with 2 fresh glasses just as John turned, bottle in hand. Their collision was sudden but soft, the wine spilling out of the bottle and splashing across Sophia's elegant dress. "Oh no!" John exclaimed, his face flooding with color. "I'm so sorry." But Sophia only laughed, waving him off as she dabbed at the stain with a napkin. "It's really not a big deal. I promise," she said, her smile putting him at ease. "I needed an excuse to change anyway." Sophia disappeared upstairs, the sound of the shower running soon filling the air. John sat on the couch, fiddling with the corkscrew and feeling a mix of embarrassment and relief. By the time Sophia returned, dressed in soft silk pajamas that flowed like water against her frame, the day's events had finally caught up with him. She found him in her bedroom, sprawled across the bed and fast asleep. His breathing was deep and even, his features softened by the gentle pull of sleep. Sophia's smile returned, warmer this time, as she set the glasses on the nightstand and slipped under the covers beside him. She curled close, her head resting on his shoulder as the steady rhythm of his heartbeat lulled her into her own slumber. The soft glow of morning light spilled through the large windows of Sophia's bedroom, painting the room in golden hues. John stirred against the plush pillows, the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee coaxing him fully awake. He blinked, his vision clearing to reveal Sophia standing nearby, a tray balanced effortlessly in her hands. Her smile was warm, unassuming, and contagious. "Good morning," she said, setting the tray down on the small table near the bed. The delicate clink of ceramic on wood filled the room. On the tray were 2 steaming mugs of coffee and plates of avocado toast, each slice topped with a drizzle of jam that caught the light like tiny jewels. John sat up, leaning back against the headboard as he ran a hand through his messy hair. "This is something new," he said, his voice still gravelly from sleep. "Breakfast in bed? From a girl I've only just met." His tone was teasing, but there was a softness in his expression that hinted at something deeper. Sophia laughed lightly, pulling a chair closer to the bed. "I figured you deserved a little pampering after such a chaotic night. Besides," she added, her eyes twinkling, "I'm not just any girl." He took a bite of the toast, the unexpected combination of creamy avocado and sweet jam surprising him. "Wow," he murmured, glancing at her with an amused grin. "This is different. Good different." They ate in companionable silence for a moment, the kind where words felt unnecessary. The air between them was light, but there was an undercurrent of unspoken possibility. Though they barely knew each other, both felt that this quiet morning, this small act of kindness, could be the start of something far more meaningful. John finished his coffee, lounging lazily against the pillows, when the shrill ring of his phone shattered the peaceful moment. He reached for it quickly, glancing at the screen. The name Mr. Lawrence flashed in bold letters. Sophia noticed the subtle shift in his demeanor, the way his shoulders tensed, his relaxed expression replaced by one of unease. "Oh, it's my boss," he muttered, pressing the phone to his ear. The voice on the other end was loud, angry, and carried easily across the room. "John, where the hell are you?" Mr. Lawrence barked. "The workday started an hour ago." John sat up straighter, his grip on the phone tightening. I wasn't feeling well this morning," he stammered, glancing at Sophia, who watched him with a concerned frown. "I overslept." His boss cut him off sharply, his words like a series of rapid punches. "This is the 3rd time this month, John. Do you think I'm running a charity? You know what? I'm done. You're fired." The line went dead before John could respond, the abruptness leaving a heavy silence in its wake. John lowered the phone slowly, staring at the screen for a moment before letting out a sigh. Sophia, who had been sitting on the edge of the bed, leaned closer, her hand resting lightly on the bedspread. "Is everything okay?" she asked hesitantly, her voice gentle but edged with worry. "I just got fired," John said with a wry smile, though his tone was reflective rather than bitter. He set the phone down on the bedside table and looked at Sophia, his eyes carrying a hint of clarity. "But you know what? Maybe it's for the best. Last night and this morning, It made me realize I want more than just working to survive. I want to live. Sophia tilted her head, her expression softening as she searched his face. There was something in his tone, hope, determination, that stirred a quiet admiration in her. John clapped his hands lightly, breaking the tension with a smile. Well, if I've been fired, that means I have a free day. How about we go out for coffee? My treat this time. Sophia laughed, a light, melodic sound. You just lost your job, and you're offering to buy me coffee? Absolutely, John said with mock seriousness. I might be unemployed, but I've still got some charm to spare. Sophia and John stepped out into the crisp morning air, their footsteps light as they made their way down the street. Just a few blocks from her building was a charming little cafe, its outdoor seating framed by planters filled with vibrant flowers. The cafe buzzed with quiet conversation, the aroma of freshly ground coffee mingling with the faint scent of pastries from the display case. They found a cozy table near the window, sunlight streaming in and painting everything in a warm glow. Sophia ordered a latte with oat milk and a touch of cinnamon, while John opted for a classic black coffee. When it came time to pay, John waved Sophia off with a grin. I've got this, he said, his voice playful but firm. Sophia raised a brow but allowed herself to be charmed. Well, thank you, Mr. Generosity, she teased, taking her latte as they stepped outside. After leaving the cafe, they wandered through the city streets, the energy of Los Angeles humming around them. The mix of laughter, street performers, and the occasional bark of a dog created a backdrop that felt alive with possibility. They turned a corner and came upon a small park, where a row of benches lined a tree-shaded path. Let's sit for a bit, Sophia suggested, gesturing to an empty bench under the sprawling branches of an old oak tree. As they settled in, a cheerful bell caught their attention. Just a few steps away was an ice cream cart, its colorful umbrella swaying in the breeze. How about some ice cream? John suggested, standing up with a smile. Sophia laughed, shaking her head in mock disbelief. You really know how to spoil a girl. He returned a few moments later, balancing two cones. Plain vanilla for me, he said, handing her the second cone. And chocolate with caramel jam and sprinkles for you. Sophia's eyes lit up as she took the treat. How did you know I'd want something so over the top? John shrugged, a playful glint in his eye. Just a lucky guess. As they continued walking, Sophia turned to John, her tone more serious now. Actually, there's something I wanted to ask you. Yeah? He replied, licking his cone and glancing at her curiously. I recently bought a new property, a fixer-upper, she explained. I've got all this furniture to unload and a lot of repairs that need doing. It's a big project, and I could use some extra hands. Would you be interested? John considered it for a moment, then nodded. Sure, I'd be happy to help. Sounds like a good way to keep busy. Sophia's face brightened. Great, I'll show you everything you need to know. They arrived at the property later that day, a sprawling yet slightly weathered house with character written into its every creak and corner. Inside, the air carried the faint scent of sawdust and fresh paint, the kind of aroma that hinted at transformation in progress. Sophia walked John through each room, pointing out areas that needed work. This is the living room, she said, gesturing to a stack of furniture wrapped in protective covers. We need to unpack all this and arrange it. The kitchen needs shelving, and the upstairs bathrooms? She trailed off, laughing softly. Let's just say there's plenty to do. John nodded, taking it all in. Got it. Show me where the invoices and plans are. I want to make sure everything matches up. Sophia handed him a binder filled with neatly organized papers. Everything's in here, delivery schedules, item lists, even the repair plans. John flipped through the pages, his expression serious. You're really on top of things, he said, impressed. I try, Sophia replied with a modest shrug. For the next week, John threw himself into the work. From lifting heavy furniture to fixing minor repairs, he tackled each task with diligence and care. His sleeves were often rolled up, his hands calloused from labor, but there was a satisfaction in the effort. Sophia would occasionally stop by, bringing iced tea or snacks, and they'd chat briefly before he returned to work. Sophia couldn't help but admire his work ethic. He treated each task, no matter how small, with the same level of importance. By the end of the week, the house had transformed. Rooms that were once empty now felt inviting, each piece of furniture carefully placed. The repairs, though simple, made a world of difference. It was during one of these visits that Sophia received surprising news. Her right-hand assistant, who had managed her schedules and logistics for years, had resigned unexpectedly. The vacancy left a significant gap in her operations, one she couldn't afford to leave unfilled for long. Watching John work, she saw a potential solution. His responsibility, attention to detail, and natural dedication stood out. After some deliberation, she approached him. "John," she began, her tone thoughtful, "I have an offer for you." He looked up from the box he was unpacking, curiosity flickering across his face. "What's that?" Sophia stepped closer, folding her arms loosely as she leaned against the doorframe. "My manager just resigned, and it's left me in a bit of a bind. I need someone reliable, someone I can trust to handle operations and logistics. And after seeing how you've worked this week," she paused, her smile soft, "I think you'd be perfect for the job." John blinked, caught off guard. "You want me to be your manager? Why not?" Sophia said, her confidence unwavering. "You've proven yourself to be hardworking, dependable, and capable. I need someone like you on my team." For a moment, John was silent, processing her words. Then a smile slowly spread across his face, one filled with gratitude and pride. "I don't know what to say, Sophia. Thank you. I'd be honored." Sophia returned his smile, her eyes gleaming with warmth. "Welcome to the team, John." John dove into his role as Sophia's manager with a mix of nervous energy and determination. Each morning, he arrived early, reviewing schedules and setting priorities for the day. By the time the team began to arrive, he was already in motion, ensuring furniture deliveries were on time and repair crews were properly coordinated. For the first time in years, John felt he had a job that mattered, one where his contributions were visible and meaningful. Sophia made a point to acknowledge his efforts regularly. "You're doing incredible work, John," she said one afternoon after he successfully negotiated a delayed shipment at no extra cost. "I knew you'd be great, but you've exceeded my expectations." Her encouragement gave him confidence, and he began to see himself in a new light. The compliments weren't just kind words. They were a reflection of his growing ability and the respect he had earned. One evening, as John finished tidying his workspace, his phone vibrated in his pocket. He smiled when he saw the caller ID. "Mom." Sliding his finger across the screen, he answered cheerfully, "Hi, Mom. It's so good to hear from you. How are you?" There was a hesitation on the other end, a pause that immediately put him on edge. "John," she began, her voice wavering, "I need to tell you something. I didn't want to worry you, but I don't know what else to do." John's chest tightened. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice low and urgent. "I've been diagnosed with cancer," she said quietly, each word heavy with emotion. "The doctors say it's treatable, but the treatments, they're so expensive." John's heart dropped. "Cancer?" he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "What kind of treatment do you need? How soon do we have to start?" "They want to begin chemotherapy right away," she explained, her tone growing steadier as if she were trying to reassure him. "They say there's a good chance, but only if we act quickly. The problem is, John, I can't afford it." "I'll figure it out," he said automatically, the words spilling from his mouth before he could fully grasp their weight. "Don't worry, Mom. We'll make it work." That night, as John lay in bed next to Sophia, the weight of his mother's diagnosis pressed heavily on his chest. His mind raced with questions. How would he raise the money? Should he ask Sophia for help? Could he even tell her? Sophia turned toward him, the soft glow of the bedside lamp casting her face in warm light. "You've been quiet all night," she said gently, her brows furrowed with concern. "Is everything okay?" John hesitated, his throat tightening as he searched for the right words. "It's nothing," he said finally, forcing a weak smile. Just a lot on my mind. She studied him for a moment, clearly unconvinced but unwilling to push him further. Instead, she reached out and took his hand, squeezing it softly. If you ever need to talk, I'm here, she said. John nodded, grateful for her kindness, but still unable to share the weight of his worries. The next day at work, Sophia called John into her office, her usual composed demeanor giving way to something more somber. She gestured for him to sit, and as he did, she leaned against her desk, her arms folded and her gaze fixed on the floor. John, she began, her voice steady but tinged with an unusual hesitance. There's something I need to tell you. His chest tightened as he leaned forward slightly. What is it? Is something wrong? Sophia exhaled deeply, her eyes finally meeting his. I've been thinking about this for a while now, and I didn't want to spring it on you without warning. But I need to step down from my position. John blinked, her words not registering at first. Step down? You mean resign? She nodded, her expression softening. Yes, there are personal matters I need to focus on, things I can't manage while running the company at the same time. It's not an easy decision, but it's the right one for me. John felt a mix of emotions. Concern for her, disbelief at the suddenness, and worry about what this meant for the company. Sophia, are you sure? You've built so much here. Is there anything I can do to help? Sophia smiled faintly, touched by his reaction. You've already helped more than you know, John. That's part of the reason I feel confident making this decision. I know the company is in good hands. He straightened in his seat, her words settling in. You're trusting me to take on more? I'm trusting you to be the anchor, Sophia said, her voice filled with warmth. I'll still be involved from the sidelines, but you've proven you have what it takes to keep things running smoothly. John's mind raced. He hadn't anticipated this level of responsibility, but the faith Sophia placed in him filled him with a quiet resolve. When will you officially step down? He asked carefully. Soon, she replied, her tone firm but calm. There's a lot to finalize, and I want to ensure the transition is as seamless as possible. But for now, I wanted you to know. As John left her office, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the new challenge ahead. Sophia's resignation would change everything, but her confidence in him left a spark of determination burning in his chest. That evening, as they sat together on the couch at her home, Sophia placed her hand on his. This isn't goodbye, she said softly. It's just a new chapter, for both of us. After Sophia's resignation, the weight of running the business fell squarely on John's shoulders. His days became a whirlwind of meetings, deadlines, and decisions that left him with little time to think about anything else. While he had always worked hard, the sheer volume of responsibilities was overwhelming. He worked late into the evenings, often leaving the office well after dark, and by the time he reached home, exhaustion consumed him. As the weeks passed, the pressures of the job clouded his mind, and the thoughts of his mother, her condition, and their last conversation grew distant. He convinced himself that she was fine, that she would call if things were urgent. But one evening, as he walked through the door of his apartment, the blinking red light on his phone caught his attention. He picked it up and saw several missed calls from his mother. A wave of guilt and fear washed over him. Without hesitation, he dialed her number. The phone barely rang before she answered, her voice weak but steady. John, I've been trying to reach you, she said, a trace of relief in her tone. Mom, I'm so sorry, he said, running a hand through his hair. Work's been crazy. What's wrong? I need surgery, she said quietly. It's scheduled for 2 days from now. The doctors say it's urgent. John's chest tightened. Surgery? He repeated, his voice cracking. Yes, she replied. I didn't want to worry you, but it's time. I don't have a choice anymore. He took a deep breath, willing himself to stay calm. Don't worry, Mom. Everything will be fine. I'll figure it out, he reassured her, though his mind raced with the question of how he would manage everything. The next morning, John sat in his office, staring at the endless stack of paperwork on his desk. His mother's words echoed in his mind, and with each passing moment, his sense of helplessness grew. Finally, desperation overtook him. He needed money now. Glancing at his computer, his gaze lingered on the company's financial accounts, which he had access to as Sophia's trusted manager. His stomach churned at the thought, but he rationalized it as a temporary solution. With trembling hands, he logged into the system and withdrew a significant amount, just enough to cover his mother's surgery and treatment. The guilt was immediate, but he pushed it aside. "It's for Mom," he told himself, booking the first available flight to Canada. Later that day, as John packed his bag for the trip, his phone rang. It was Sophia. Taking a deep breath, he answered. "Hey, Sophia," he began, his tone subdued. "John, what's going on?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. "I heard from accounting about a large withdrawal. What's happening?" "I'm sorry," he said quickly, his words tumbling out. "I had to take the money. My mom needs surgery. She's in Canada, and I have to go." There was a long pause before Sophia spoke again, her voice sharp and edged with disbelief. "John, I get that you're in a tough spot, but how could you just take the money and leave? Do you have any idea what you're leaving behind? This business, it's my life. I trusted you with it." "I know, Sophia," John said, his voice cracking. "I know I've let you down, but my mom..." She cut him off. "What about everything we've built? Everything I've worked for? You can't just abandon it." The words stung, and John felt the weight of her disappointment settle heavily on his chest. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I really am." Before she could respond, he ended the call, unable to bear the silence that followed. On the flight to Canada, John stared out the window, the endless expanse of clouds blurring as tears filled his eyes. He replayed Sophia's words over and over, her anger and hurt cutting deeper with each memory. She had trusted him, given him a chance when no one else had, and he had betrayed that trust. As the plane descended, the weight of his actions pressed heavily on him. He had made his choice, but the cost felt unbearable. Arriving at the hospital, John stepped out of the taxi, the cold Canadian air biting at his skin. He walked through the sliding glass doors, the sterile smell of antiseptic greeting him as he made his way to the front desk. "I'm here for my mother," he said to the receptionist, giving her name. Moments later, he was led to her room. Seeing her lying in the hospital bed, her face pale but calm, brought a fresh wave of guilt and resolve. He placed a hand on hers, squeezing gently. "I'm here, Mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm going to take care of everything." True to his word, John settled the bills for the surgery and treatment, ensuring that his mother would receive the best care possible. Later that evening, back at his hotel room, John logged into his online banking account and transferred the remaining money back to Sophia's account. Along with the transaction, he attached a simple note. "Please forgive me. I had no other choice." John sat beside his mother in the quiet hospital room, the hum of medical equipment providing a backdrop to her soft breathing. The surgery had been a success, and though the road to recovery was long, the worst was behind them. As he held her hand, the weight of his sacrifices felt lighter, knowing that his actions had given her a chance at life. "John," his mother said, her voice weak but steady, "I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done." He smiled, shaking his head. "You don't have to thank me, Mom. You've done more for me than I can ever repay." Tears glistened in her eyes as she whispered, "You're a good man, John, and you have a good heart. I only hope the world sees that as clearly as I do." Her words struck a chord, and for the first time in days, John allowed himself to breathe. But even as his mother recovered, a part of his heart ached for Sophia. He had left her in anger, taking what wasn't his to take, and the guilt gnawed at him. Weeks passed, and John returned to the small apartment he had rented near the hospital. He found solace in odd jobs, saving what little he could while ensuring his mother's treatment continued without interruption. One evening, as he reviewed the dwindling numbers in his bank account, his phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Hesitant, he answered. "John," came Sophia's voice, calm but firm. His heart raced. "Sophia," he said, standing as though bracing for impact. "I got your message," she said. "The money, the note." There was a pause, her voice softening. "I don't know whether to be angry or grateful." John swallowed hard. "I'm sorry," he said. "I had no choice. My mom needed me. But I know I betrayed your trust." Sophia sighed on the other end. "You did. But I understand why you did it. And honestly, I'm not calling to dwell on the past. I'm calling because I've been thinking about what you said, that you wanted to live, not just survive. And maybe I can help you with that." His brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Sophia's voice gained a touch of its usual warmth. "I'm starting a new project, a foundation focused on supporting families dealing with medical crises. It's still in the early stages, but I need someone I can trust to help me build it. Someone who understands what it means to make sacrifices for the people they love." John was stunned into silence. "John," Sophia prompted. I don't know what to say," he stammered. "Say yes," she replied simply. The next few months were a whirlwind. With Sophia's guidance, John found himself immersed in work that gave him not just purpose but joy. They built the foundation together, creating a lifeline for others who had faced the same struggles. Through late nights and shared victories, the tension between them eased. Sophia saw in John a partner, someone who could see the world as she did, through a lens of compassion and determination. And John saw in Sophia not just the woman who had given him a chance, but someone who could challenge and inspire him in ways he hadn't known he needed. One evening, as they stood in the Foundation's new office, celebrating the launch, Sophia looked at John with a soft smile. "You've come a long way," she said. "So have you," he replied, his gaze steady. "Do you regret anything?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. John hesitated, then shook his head. "No, not if it brought me here." Their eyes met, and in that moment, the past felt like a distant memory, the future a canvas waiting to be painted.